Welcome to The Inner Entrepreneur. I'm Paul Ryan, and in today's episode, we ask the question, are your fears holding you back? Now, we all have fears. The most successful people in the world have fears, and the biggest failures in the world have fears. Everyone has fears. The difference is that not everyone is controlled by their fears. Now, we have to start off by acknowledging that fear is a good thing. Fear is our brain's way of protecting us, of warning us about things that may happen in the near term, short term, or long term future. But it's warning us to protect us. And sometimes that's protecting us from death. But mostly, 90% of the time, it's not protecting us from death. It's just protecting us from imaginations in our own mind. The most important thing to realize is that everyone experiences fear. From the most successful person in the world to those who are not successful, everyone experiences fear, but not everyone is controlled by it. I heard a great story a couple of years ago about a young artist who asked Bruce Springsteen how he managed stage fright. Bruce just laughed and he said, "I'm terrified going on stage. Before a gig, I'm standing backstage ready to throw up." He plays to stadiums full of 100,000 people. He has records going back 30, 40 years. He's one of the biggest selling artists in the world. So once he turns on that stage and sings his hits, the audience are going to love him. What's he got to be afraid of? But before he comes on stage, when he's standing backstage looking at the audience, he is terrified. He wants to throw up. But, and here's the difference, he still walks on stage and he looks with terror to the 80,000 people looking at him, and he starts singing. And once it gets rolling, once it starts flowing, he gets into the flow, he does it anyway, and his fears go away, he feels great, and he really enjoys it. But if he was to allow his fears to control him, he would never get on that stage. You see, we all live with fears, even the great Bruce Springsteen. The question is, will you let your fears control you? Now, many years ago, I was in Spain with my 3 young sons, and I took them to one of these treetop parks where you have all these rope adventures and you climb through the trees and all these wonderful things. Except I have a fear of heights. But I took my sons here for the day, and the first climb you get to do is this monster wall you have to climb up. And I looked up at this thing and my heart was pounding and I'm thinking, there is no way I can go up this wall. Thankfully, one of the instructors came over and he looked at my youngest son and he said, "Excuse me, sir, but this boy is too short to make this climb. It won't be safe with the harness, etc. He can't do it." Now, thankfully, my 2 older sons were big enough to do it, and they were old enough, so they climbed the wall themselves, and then they continued on through version 1 of the treetop park. And I was led to a smaller climb with my son, which was much more manageable, and we did a much more gentle version of the day. Now, we both had lots of fun, and it was great, and secretly, I was delighted that I wasn't forced to climb the big wall. So roll on 12 months later. We're in Spain for the summer again, and my 2 oldest sons go off to camp for a couple of weeks. So it's just me, my wife, and my young son. And he says to me, "Dad, can we go back and do the treetop park?" Now, I was delighted to take him somewhere because I wanted to entertain him while his older brothers are away. And I said, sure. I'm assuming it's a year later. He still won't be able to climb the wall, and it'll be all good. I won't have to face my fears. But we get to the park and they have these measurements, that you can walk up and see what you can do. And he walks up and he goes, "I'm old enough to do the big climb." So I kind of go, you want to do the big climb? So we go over, sit down at a table. We get a couple of drinks and I go, "Do you really think you want to do that climb? It's very tall." And he goes, "Dad, that wall is the only reason I came back. I needed to come back and conquer my fears. Now, I have raised my 3 sons to dream big, to imagine the life they could create themselves, to take on the challenges that brings, and most of all, to conquer their fears and go after their dreams. This is what I've preached to my son for the last 12 years. And now he wants to do it. He wants to embrace it. He wants to do the climb. And I'm terrified. And I'm thinking, how can I do this? But I had a choice in that moment. There were 2 things going on in my head. One was my fear of heights, and the second was my love for my son and my desire for my son to conquer his fear so he could have that registered in his brain that when he was afraid of something, that he could come back and conquer it. So of course we went to the wall. My son went up first like Spider-Man, and I had to follow, and I climbed that wall. Did I conquer my fears? I still felt my fears. I still felt terrified climbing the wall, but I climbed it anyway. I did not let that stand in the way of me getting to the top of the wall, of me doing what I wanted to do for my son. And I did not let it get in the way of my son having the opportunity to conquer his fears. You see, what it comes down to is we all have fears, but what are you going to do with your fears? Now, I spoke earlier about the fact that our fears are good for us because our fears are a warning. And if you're somewhere where you are in real danger, where you might be attacked, you might be mugged or robbed, or worse still, you might be in danger of your life, should you stand and face that fear? No, you should run. You should go and find safety. That is what fear is there for you. But that's only 1% of our life. 99% of our lives are us dealing with imagined fears. And those fears usually come down to a fear of failure, a fear of rejection, fear of looking foolish in front of our family or our colleagues or our friends. They come down to fears that aren't actually real fears. I mean, we feel them like real fears. When I climbed the wall that day, sure, I conquered that fear and I climbed the wall, but my body was still terrified. So you will look at these fears. Don't want to fail. I don't want to feel foolish. I don't want to be the laughing stock. I don't want to be rejected. You're going to physically feel that, but that doesn't make it real. They're just thoughts rolling around your head. So the first step is to acknowledge that they are just thoughts and they're rolling around your head. I know in every episode I say, go grab some paper and a pen and start writing. But I've found that it's one of the most therapeutic things you can do. It's one of the best ways of getting your feelings out of your body, and it's one of the best ways of understanding yourself. So when you feel your fears, go grab a pen and paper and start writing down what your fears are. Because when you put them on paper in front of you, then you can see that you're not afraid of something life-threatening. You're afraid of something in your imagination. You're afraid of a thought. And the thoughts aren't real unless you give them the power to become real in your life. So you sit down with a piece of paper and you write down your fears, and now you look at them. And when you look at them, you've got them outside and you can acknowledge them. So you're no longer being haunted by some anonymous ghoul. You're going, so this is what it is. I'm afraid of failure. I'm afraid of being rejected. I'm afraid of looking foolish. I'm afraid it looks like I'm a loser. All of these are just fears. And really, are you going to allow these fears to control your life? You see, once you've acknowledged the fear, now the question is, what is it you want to do? What are your dreams and your hopes? What's your purpose? Because sitting in the treetop park that day, my purpose was to allow my son to experience overcoming his fears and dominating a challenge so he would grow as a boy, as a man. And that was much stronger in my mind than my own fear of heights. So I acted in spite of my fear of heights. And when you look at your fears on paper, now you have a choice to act in spite of your fears. And the best way to get yourself to act in spite of your fears is to create a big enough why, is to make the goal big enough. And the ultimate goal is the life you will live if you can conquer those fears and if you can go and create the life you want. The ultimate risk is that you will have lived a half-life where you'll have come nowhere near your own potential because of thoughts running round your head. So the next time you feel fear, sit down, grab your pen, grab your pad and write down what the fear is and confront it and look at it and ask yourself, am I going to let this fear rule my life? And then focus on the purpose, focus on what you want to create. Because if you don't, all your energy is going into your fear. And you know that if all your energy goes into your fear, then your fears will grow. If you transfer your energy into the life you can create, into your goals, into your dreams, into your purpose, into your motivation, then that will grow. But don't expect the fear to completely disappear. Fear is part of our nature and it will always be there. You've just got to fuel the motivation. You've got to fuel the purpose. And once you recognize the fear, once you've fueled your purpose, then just step up and do it anyway. It may not be easy, but it will be so worthwhile. Thank you for listening today. If you liked this episode, please share, like, subscribe, comment. It really helps the show. Thank you. Have a great day.